There exists a law in the unconscious realm that operates as precisely as gravity, yet remains invisible to those caught in its grip. Like attracts like, wound calls to wound, and brokenness seeks its mirror in others with an accuracy that would astound us if we could see it operating. If you find yourself repeatedly drawn to people who are damaged, chaotic, emotionally unavailable, or destructive, if your relationships read like a catalogue of beautiful disasters and promising souls who turned out to be emotional hurricanes, then you are experiencing this law firsthand. But here is what will disturb you more than the pattern itself. You are not the innocent victim of other people's brokenness. You are its unconscious accomplice. Jung understood what modern psychology often glosses over in its rush to assign blame and victimhood. We do not attract what we consciously want. We attract what we unconsciously are. The magnetic field that draws broken people to you and you to them is not generated by bad luck, poor judgment, or a cruel universe. It is generated by the unconscious patterns, unhealed wounds, and shadow material that you carry within your own psyche like a beacon that signals to similar souls across the crowded landscape of human interaction. This is not a comfortable truth. It requires you to stop seeing yourself as the perpetual rescuer, the innocent helper, the one who simply has bad luck with people, and instead recognize yourself as an active participant in a psychological dance that you have been choreographing without knowing it. The broken people you attract are not random accidents, but precise mirrors reflecting back to you the parts of yourself that you have refused to see, heal, or integrate. The pattern often begins in childhood, where the future attractor of broken people learns to find their value through being needed, through fixing others, through being the strong one in relationships where strength is required not as a gift, but as a survival mechanism. They become what I call wound collectors, individuals who unconsciously seek out damaged souls, not from genuine compassion, but from a deep need to feel important, needed, superior, or simply to avoid facing their own inner emptiness by staying busy with everyone else's drama. But the magnetic field operates on levels far more subtle than conscious choice. The person who attracts broken people often carries what Jung called unlived life, parts of themselves that they have rejected, repressed, or never allowed to develop. They are drawn to others who embody these rejected aspects, living vicariously through their chaos, their freedom, their ability to feel deeply, even if destructively, their willingness to break rules and boundaries that the attractor has never dared to challenge in themselves. Consider the woman who prides herself on being stable, responsible, and emotionally regulated, yet finds herself irresistibly drawn to men who are unpredictable, passionate, and chaotic. She tells herself she wants to help them, to bring stability to their lives, but the unconscious truth is that she is addicted to the vicarious experience of the wildness she has never allowed herself to feel. She needs their brokenness to feel whole, their chaos to feel alive, their emotional storms to experience the intensity she has forbidden herself to express. Or consider the man who sees himself as a healer, a wise counselor, someone who can love others back to wholeness, yet consistently chooses partners who are depressed, traumatized, or addicted to drama. He believes he is being charitable, spiritual, evolved. But the shadow truth is that he needs to be needed, requires others to be broken so he can feel powerful, uses his role as rescuer to avoid the terrifying vulnerability of being in relationship with an equal who might see through his savior persona to the frightened child beneath. The magnetic field that draws broken people to you is powered by your own unintegrated shadow, your own unhealed wounds, your own unlived life. Until you recognize this, until you turn the searchlight of consciousness onto your own unconscious motivations, you will continue to attract exactly what you claim you want to avoid, creating an endless cycle of beautiful disasters that leave you wondering why love always looks like rescue and relationship always feels like work. Behind the noble facade of wanting to help broken people lies one of the most seductive and dangerous forms of shadow possession, the savior complex. This is not the genuine compassion of the healed helper, but the unconscious manipulation of the wounded rescuer, who uses others' brokenness as a drug to feed their own hidden sense of inadequacy, superiority, and control. If you consistently find yourself drawn to people who need fixing, if you feel most alive when someone needs saving, if your relationships revolve around your role as the wise, stable, giving partner, then you are not experiencing love. You are experiencing possession by an archetype that Jung warned could consume the very soul it claims to serve. The savior complex operates through what I call inverted narcissism, a form of self-centeredness so subtle that it masquerades as selflessness. The person possessed by this complex needs to be needed more than they need to be loved. They require others to be broken so they can feel whole, demand gratitude as payment for their help, and use their role as rescuer to avoid the terrifying vulnerability of being truly seen by an equal. They have made themselves indispensable to others as a way of feeling essential to themselves, but this false sense of worth requires a constant supply of victims to maintain. This psychological possession manifests in predictable patterns. The savior unconsciously seeks out people who are damaged enough to need them, but not so damaged that they cannot provide the emotional payoff of gratitude and dependence. They are drawn to the beautiful broken, those whose wounds are visible enough to trigger their rescue instincts, but whose potential is great enough to make the savior feel important for recognizing it. They fall in love not with who the person is, but with who they imagine they can help them become. The savior complex feeds on what Jung called psychological inflation, the unconscious identification with an archetypal role that makes the ego feel godlike, powerful, necessary. The person possessed by this complex begins to believe they have special powers to heal others, unique insights into what people need, almost magical abilities to love others back to wholeness. They mistake their compulsive need to fix others for spiritual calling, their addiction to being needed for divine purpose, their inability to love equals for noble sacrifice. But the shadow truth beneath this inflation is devastating. The savior is often more broken than those they claim to help. Their need to fix others is a desperate attempt to fix themselves through proxy, to heal their own wounds by healing others, to feel powerful in relationships because they feel powerless in life. They are drawn to broken people because brokenness is familiar, because chaos feels like home, because they learned early that love is earned through service and worth is measured by usefulness. The most insidious aspect of the savior complex is how it corrupts genuine intimacy. The savior cannot tolerate being in relationship with someone who doesn't need them because such a relationship would require them to show up as themselves rather than as a rescuer. They fear that if they cannot save their partner, if they cannot be the solution to their partner's problems, then they have nothing of value to offer. The possibility of being loved for who they are rather than what they do terrifies them more than any external threat. This creates what I call therapeutic relationships, connections that look like partnerships but function like ongoing counseling sessions where one person is always the patient and the other is always the healer. The savior gets to feel important, wise and needed while avoiding the reciprocal vulnerability that genuine love requires. They maintain emotional distance through the illusion of emotional closeness, staying safely in the role of giver while never risking the exposure of being a receiver. The broken people they attract unconsciously recognize this dynamic and are drawn to it like moths to flame. They sense the savior's need to be needed and offer themselves as the perfect project, the ideal victim, the beautiful disaster who can make the savior feel important while never threatening their sense of superiority. It is a perfect unconscious contract. The savior gets to feel powerful, and the broken person gets to remain irresponsible for their own healing. To understand why certain souls are magnetized to brokenness with such consistency, we must excavate deeper than personal psychology into what Jung called the ancestral layer of the unconscious, where family patterns repeat across generations like ghost stories told in blood and bone. The attraction to broken people is rarely a personal creation, but an inherited template, a psychological inheritance passed down through lineages that have normalized chaos, trauma, and dysfunction as the natural texture of love. The person who attracts broken people often comes from families where crisis was currency, where drama was the only language of intimacy, where someone's pain was always more important than someone else's peace. They learn to equate love with rescue, connection with chaos, and worth with their ability to remain functional while others fell apart. These early imprints become the unconscious blueprint for all future relationships, creating what I call trauma templates that seek familiar patterns even when those patterns are destructive. In these family systems, the future attractor of broken people typically played one of several archetypal roles. The parentified child who learned to manage adults' emotions, the family mediator who absorbed everyone's conflicts to maintain peace, the emotional regulator who sacrificed their own needs to keep the system stable, or the designated strong one who was never allowed to be vulnerable because someone else was always in crisis. These roles, once adaptive for survival, become maladaptive in adult relationships, where they continue to seek the familiar dysfunction of their origin. But the ancestral echoes run deeper than immediate family dynamics. Many people who attract broken souls carry what Jung recognized as ancestral trauma, the unprocessed pain of previous generations that seeks resolution through their descendants. Perhaps their grandparents survived war, poverty, or persecution that left psychic wounds never allowed to heal. Perhaps their parents grew up in families where emotional expression was dangerous, where vulnerability meant death, where strength was the only acceptable way of being. These ancestral wounds create unconscious commands that echo through generations. Don't trust safety. Love always hurts. Someone must always be suffering. Peace is dangerous because it means you're not paying attention to the threat. The attraction to broken people becomes an unconscious attempt to complete ancestral healing, to finally save the family members who could never be saved, to prove that love can triumph over pain, that dedication can heal trauma, that enough sacrifice can redeem suffering. The person caught in this pattern is not consciously choosing broken partners. They are unconsciously responding to ancestral voices that whisper, "This is how love looks in our family. This is what connection feels like. This is the price you pay for intimacy." These ancestral patterns manifest in what I call repetition compulsion on a generational scale. The person finds themselves recreating their parents' dysfunctional relationship dynamics, their grandparents' trauma bonds, their families' unspoken agreements about who gets to be healthy and who must remain broken. They become unwitting actors in ancestral dramas, playing out unfinished business that began long before they were born. The dreams of these individuals often reveal the ancestral dimension of their attraction to brokenness. They dream of family members they've never met reaching out from graves, of ancestral homes filled with weeping figures, of themselves carrying burdens that feel ancient and familiar. These are not metaphorical dreams, but direct communications from the ancestral unconscious, showing them the source of their compulsive attraction to damaged souls and revealing the generational wound they have been unconsciously trying to heal. The most tragic aspect of this ancestral programming is that it disguises itself as virtue. The family system rewards the person for continuing the pattern, praising them for their loyalty, their strength, their willingness to sacrifice for others. They are told they are the good one, the strong one, the one who can handle anything, never recognizing that they have been designated as the family's trauma processor, the one who carries everyone's unprocessed pain so that others can maintain the illusion of being functional. Breaking free from ancestral trauma bonding requires what Jung called conscious suffering. The willingness to feel the family's accumulated pain without acting it out, to grieve the losses that previous generations could not grieve, to heal the wounds that were passed down like heirlooms nobody wanted but everyone was afraid to discard. At the deepest level of the unconscious attraction to broken people lies perhaps the most profound psychological mechanism Jung ever identified: shadow projection. The people you are drawn to, especially those who seem most troubled, chaotic, or damaged, are not random encounters, but precise mirrors reflecting back the parts of yourself that you have disowned, rejected, or buried so deeply that you can only experience them through others. Your attraction to their brokenness is actually your psyche's desperate attempt to reconnect with your own rejected aspects, to reclaim the parts of yourself that you have banished to the shadow realm. Shadow projection operates through what Jung called the law of psychological compensation. When we reject certain aspects of ourselves, our wildness, our vulnerability, our anger, our neediness, our capacity for destruction, these rejected parts do not disappear. Instead, they become autonomous forces in the unconscious that seek expression through our attraction to others who embody these qualities openly. The ordered person is drawn to chaos because chaos lives in their shadow. The strong person is attracted to weakness because they have never allowed themselves to be vulnerable. The good person is fascinated by badness because they have never integrated their own capacity for darkness. This projection creates what I call complementary wounding, where your psychological gaps are filled by someone else's psychological excesses. If you have overdeveloped your capacity for responsibility, you will be magnetically drawn to someone who is irresponsible. If you have suppressed your emotional expression, you will find yourself attracted to someone who is overly emotional. If you have rejected your own neediness, you will be drawn to someone whose needs are overwhelming. You believe you are helping them, but unconsciously, you're using them to experience the parts of yourself you have forbidden. The broken people you attract often carry the emotional intensity you have learned to suppress, the spontaneity you have trained yourself to control, the passion you have taught yourself to fear, the freedom you have convinced yourself is dangerous. Through relationship with them, you get to experience these qualities vicariously while maintaining your identity as the stable, controlled, responsible one. You live through their emotional storms while telling yourself you are bringing them calm. You feed off their chaos while believing you are offering them order. But shadow projection is a double-edged sword. While it allows you to experience your disowned parts through others, it also ensures that you never have to take responsibility for integrating these aspects within yourself. You can experience wildness through your chaotic partner while never having to risk being wild yourself. You can feel deep emotion through your dramatic friend while never having to risk feeling deeply yourself. You can touch your own darkness through your troubled loved one while maintaining your image as a person of light. This dynamic creates what Jung called psychological vampirism, where both parties feed off each other's disowned aspects without ever becoming whole within themselves. The broken person gets to avoid taking responsibility for their healing by having someone else constantly trying to fix them, while the fixer gets to avoid their own vulnerability by staying busy with someone else's problems. Neither person grows because both are using the relationship to avoid the inner work that true development requires. The most insidious aspect of shadow projection is that it feels like love. The intensity of attraction you feel toward broken people is not romantic chemistry, but psychological recognition, your shadow recognizing its reflection in another person. The passion you feel is not love, but hunger, the hunger of disowned parts of yourself, desperate for integration. The commitment you feel is not devotion, but addiction to experiencing yourself through someone else, rather than becoming yourself through inner work. Jung understood that what we cannot acknowledge within ourselves, we are destined to encounter in others, often in exaggerated or destructive forms. The person who denies their own capacity for selfishness will be attracted to narcissists. The person who rejects their own emotional needs will be drawn to the needy and dependent. The person who suppresses their own anger will find themselves in relationship with rageaholics. The qualities you most judge in others are often the qualities you most fear in yourself, and your attraction to these qualities in others is your psyche's attempt to heal the split between who you think you are and who you actually are. We arrive now at the threshold of transformation, where the person who has been unconsciously magnetizing broken people finally understands the hidden purpose behind this painful pattern. The attraction to damaged souls was never about them. It was always about you. It was your psyche's attempt to show you the parts of yourself that needed healing, integration, and acceptance. The broken people were not your burden to carry, but your teachers sent to reveal what you had refused to see within yourself. When you finally understand this, when you begin the sacred work of reclaiming your projections and integrating your shadow, the magnetic field that has been drawing destruction into your life begins to transform into something entirely different. Integration begins with what Jung called withdrawing projections, the conscious recognition that what you have been trying to heal in others actually exists within yourself. This is not comfortable work. It requires you to acknowledge that you are not as stable as you believed, not as healed as you claimed, not as evolved as you imagined. It demands that you face the parts of yourself you have spent years rejecting, your own neediness, your own chaos, your own capacity for selfishness, destruction, and emotional volatility. You must be willing to discover that you are not the rescuer in this story, but another wounded soul seeking healing. This integration process requires what I call conscious embracing of disowned aspects. Instead of experiencing your wildness through chaotic partners, you must risk being wild yourself. Instead of feeling your emotions through dramatic friends, you must allow yourself to feel deeply and authentically. Instead of touching your darkness through troubled lovers, you must acknowledge and integrate your own shadow material. You must become whole within yourself rather than seeking completion through others. The transformation is often marked by a period of profound loneliness as you withdraw from the addictive intensity of dysfunctional relationships and learn to be present with yourself in all your complexity. The calm that comes from integration can feel empty to someone who has been addicted to the drama of fixing others. The peace that comes from wholeness can feel boring to someone who has equated love with rescue and connection with chaos. You must learn to tolerate the unfamiliar sensation of being attracted to stability, kindness, and emotional health. As you integrate your shadow projections, your entire relationship pattern begins to shift. The broken people who once flocked to you begin to lose interest because you are no longer offering yourself as a rescuer, no longer available to be used as a dumping ground for their unprocessed material. You stop emanating the unconscious signals that drew them to you in the first place. Your energy field changes from "I will save you" to "I am responsible for my own healing," and this shift repels those who were drawn to your savior complex while attracting those who match your new level of consciousness. The liberated person begins to attract what Jung called individuated souls, people who have done their own shadow work, who can offer companionship without neediness, who seek connection without enmeshment, who can love without projecting. These relationships feel different because they are based on wholeness, meeting wholeness rather than brokenness, seeking completion through another's strength. There is less intensity, but more intimacy, less drama, but more depth, less passion, but more love. Perhaps most importantly, the integrated person develops what I call conscious discrimination, the ability to feel compassion for broken people without feeling compelled to save them, to recognize suffering without taking responsibility for healing it, to offer presence without sacrificing themselves. They learn the difference between genuine service and unconscious codependence, between healthy helping and shadow possession. The end of the magnetic attraction to broken people is not the end of caring, but the beginning of conscious caring. It is not the development of callousness, but the development of wisdom. You learn to say, I see your pain, but it is not mine to carry. I honor your journey, but it is not mine to direct. I offer my presence, but I will not sacrifice my peace. And this is the voice of the integrated soul, the person who has reclaimed their projections and learned to love from wholeness rather than woundedness. Your attraction to broken people was not a character flaw, but a sacred calling to become whole. When you answer that call, when you do the inner work that integration requires, you discover that the love you were seeking outside yourself was always available within, and the healing you were trying to provide for others was always meant to begin with yourself. If you recognize yourself in this pattern, if you see your own magnetic attraction to broken people reflected in these words, then your journey toward wholeness begins with a single courageous act. Stop trying to save others and start saving yourself. Stop looking for your missing pieces in someone else's brokenness and start reclaiming the parts of yourself you've disowned. Subscribe to this channel if you're ready to dive deeper into the shadow work that can transform your greatest psychological patterns into your greatest strengths. Share this video with someone else who needs to understand that their attraction to broken people is not evidence of their nobility, but a call to their own healing. And most importantly, begin today. Ask yourself, what quality am I trying to heal in others that I've never allowed myself to express? What aspect of myself am I experiencing through broken people that I need to integrate within myself? What would my relationships look like if I stopped being a rescuer and started being a whole person? Your magnetism to broken people was never about them. It was always about you becoming you. The moment you understand this, the moment you begin the sacred work of integration, everything changes. You stop being a magnet for chaos and become a beacon for conscious love. The broken people were never your burden. They were your teachers. Thank them for the lesson, and now learn to love from wholeness instead of woundedness.